Thank you, Christine. I told you today was going to be special. Even the mayor awarded today for World Doll Day. At this time, I'd like to introduce our next special guest, Elizabeth Bunce, and she's a local author who has written a series of books, Myrtle Hardcastle Mysteries.
It sounds like I'm on, and I have the power of control of the screen. So I want to say I might wander a little bit. I am Elizabeth, and I am the author of the Myrtle Hardcastle Mysteries, which are a series of Victorian mysteries for young readers and discerning older readers. And you can see the whole series arrayed up here in front. And I'm also, let's see if I can remember how the controls work. Yes, so there's Myrtle Hardcastle Mysteries. And I've written some other books for slightly older readers as well. I just want to say, I am so excited to be here celebrating World Doll Day with the doll and book lovers of Kansas City. I have received my books have received some other awards before, but I have never gotten one that made me quite as excited as the email that I got from Alicia Cole at the Westport Historical Society saying that the National Museum of Toys and Miniatures in the Kansas City Library and the Westport Historical Society had banded together to create a Myrtle Hardcastle doll. And I imagine that any author would find that to be a dream come true. But what these sponsors did not know at the time that they contacted me was that I am also a doll enthusiast. And so this, of course, was even more exciting for me personally because I had just sort of started my doll journey, particularly with hand in hand with the Myrtle books. So a little bit more about me before we dive in. I am a maker. I make stuff. I do needlework and historical costuming and quilting, and so basically, if I'm not writing, I have something else in my hand that I'm making. My journey with dolls. And there's some of the costumes that I've done, and over there on the left, that is my Disney princess costume. So that is Bash the Bounty Hunter. And I've been doing historical costuming and cosplay for many, many years, and that's how I learned to sew, and it's part of my love of history and sort of performance and of make-believe. But several years ago, so I've also done costumes that sort of go with my books, and my first book, A Curse Dark as Gold, was set in a woolen mill during the Industrial Revolution, and I made a costume to go with that book, an entirely period-correct ensemble from the 1770s, and you can see it got a new life as a Hobbit costume. And we learned one of the cardinal rules of costuming. So this was that was an early costuming effort, and you'll hear this from many historical costumers when they look back at some of their own first costumes, and the number one comment you hear is, that costume needs more petticoats. It's not quite full enough. So you'll see when it came back, we have some nice, better fullness in the skirt. Or that is totally irrelevant, but I wanted to tell you anyway. Which, if you are a Myrtle fan, that will seem quite familiar to you as well. So as I was writing and making these costumes that sort of went with my books, I was getting older, as one does, and my characters were starting to get younger and younger, and I was not. And so there was this disconnect building between the costumes that I would want to make and sort of the appropriateness of me making a who I was going to make them for. Although when I began writing the Myrtle Hardcastle Mysteries took place in the 1890s, and it's a fascinating era for girls in history. And that photograph is of a girl about Myrtle's age. She was about 14 to me, Myrtle's 12. I saw that picture. I stumbled across that after having finished the first Myrtle book, and I saw her looking back at me through the ages, and that was Myrtle. That was the girl in my head. That was the girl I put on the page, and I just loved that photograph so much. And sort of that's my image of the girl in the books, and she sort of came to life off the page as well. But so as I was becoming more and more attached to this character and to her era of costumes and the clothing that she would have worn, I was also still getting older and still not 12. But I decided I did want to make a Victorian costume for myself, and the one that seemed the most appropriate, the one that interested me the most as a historical costumer, as a writer, was the bicycling costume. Bicycling offered girls of the 1890s a whole new kind of freedom that girls had not experienced before, because a bicycle represented something that a girl could do alone by herself. She could go travel and move about the world without a chaperone, without being driven somewhere by a father or a brother. And I just loved the idea of exploring that side of things. And also, I hadn't ridden a bike in like 30 years. And so having Myrtle on her bicycle rekindled my interest in riding a bike again. And so if I'm going to get a bike, well, I need clothes to wear with the bike, right? So I made that costume. But again, still not 12. I'm still not the age of my characters, and so I'm not going to be making those costumes for myself. But dolls can be anyone you want, and that's why the theme of today's event, Endless Possibilities, is so perfect, because it represents so much of what dolls mean to us, and how we play with dolls, and how we interact with dolls, and also how we interact with books and what books mean. When you open up a book, when you play with a doll, you can be anybody. You can explore any kind of identity. You can do anything you like. So, my journey with dolls, my recent journey with dolls, began a couple of years ago when, I guess about 2.5 years ago, when my twin nieces got American Girl dolls for Christmas. And they asked me if I would sew something for them. And I said, well, I'd love to make something for your dolls. You just tell me what you want. I would like you to design things for the dolls, and I will make them. And I thought they might come back with something like, yeah, I would like a soccer costume, or I would like a, no. They wanted wedding gowns. And 7-year-olds are incredibly demanding clients. They go into such precise, exacting detail about what they wanted in this costume. You can see here, this is Irene's pink wedding dress. I mean, she was in 2nd grade at the time, so her spelling was evolving. And the pink wedding dress had the following elements: a pink lace mantilla veil with multicolored flowers, a dark pink with swirls, silver swirls, dark pink with silver swirls skirt, a white ruffled overskirt with a daisy on the hip, a light blue bodice with swirls. The swirls could be any color, and a sweetheart neckline with some kind of trim on it. Sister was a little less specific, but Tavy's dress was a mermaid style, see the scales, with a blue flounced overskirt and 3 red jewels at the bottoms. And I received this, and I thought, this is going to be the best project ever. And so I enlisted the help of a sewing community that I belong to online, and they said, you are going to need a model for these dolls, because if you're trying to extract this wedding gowns, you're going to have to go out and go to a thrift store, buy yourself a doll. So the first doll I got was the one on the far left, and she came home, and she'd been in the thrift store. She was not well dressed. She's about 25 years old, and she had been very, very well loved. And I took a picture of her and sent it to a friend, and my friend's response was, that doll has seen some things. But we got her cleaned up, we got her polished up, and I set to work on the wedding gowns.
Oh,
and there is the mermaid wedding gown. See the scales? And the blue flounced overskirt, and the 3 red jewels on the bodice. And the pink wedding gown with the dark pink underskirt with the silver swirls, and the white ruffly overskirt with the daisy on the hip. The light blue bodice, swirls can be any color. Thank you very much. The pink mantilla veil with the multicolored floral trim. And so after doing that, you can imagine I was a little bit hooked. This was not going to go away anytime soon. But the best part, of course, is those girls could not get over. They took them everywhere and bragged to their relatives and their cousins and their aunts and uncles. They live in California, and so I don't get to see them very often, and so we do a lot of stuff long distance. I designed this dress, and my auntie made it for me, and they were so proud. So this is my niece, Irene, and I can't believe I forgot this picture. Irene was Myrtle for Halloween last year. Her sister was a Dementor. So Irene is named after Irene Adler from the Sherlock Holmes story. So we're kind of a literary family. So after doing that, I had my aha moment. It was that I suddenly had a 12-year-old model that I could sew my historical costumes for. And so this was all beginning toward the beginning of the pandemic, and I think January of 2020, and the Premeditated Myrtle was originally scheduled to come out in May of 2020, but it got kind of delayed, and it ended up coming out in October, which gave me plenty of time to sew. But I realized that my book, plus my doll, would equal World Doll Day domination. Here we are. Yeah, because that was my plan. I'm going to conquer World Doll Day, which I had not heard until about 3 months ago. But I was ready. I was born for this moment. So Premeditated Myrtle, which I think is kind of actually what they asked me here to talk about. They didn't really ask me here to talk about my dolls, but I'm here and I have dolls, I'm going to talk about them anyway. Premeditated Myrtle is my first book for younger audiences. I had been writing fantasy for YA for teens, and as my teen books were trending a little darker, a little older, a little sexier, but I was getting most of my fan mail from 5th and 6th graders, and who were responding to historical settings and the dense prose and my characters and sort of really slightly darker themes. And I realized that I needed to write a book for those fans because they were out there and they were waiting. And it just so happened that I had the perfect title and idea waiting for me. I am not a morning person. I'm just going to get that out of the way, so this time works perfectly for me. I once had to give an awards speech at 7:30 in the morning. That was fun. lost my train of thought suddenly there, sorry. Oh, so not a morning person. Husband and I struggling through the morning, trying to get humans out to their jobs, trying to get dogs fed, trying to get ready for the day, trying to speak coherently about something that was happening on the news, and I don't even remember what it was now. And I was attempting to say the phrase, as one does in one's normal course of one's morning, premeditated murder. And it came out, premeditated murder. And I looked at my husband and I said, that is a middle grade mystery. And it sort of sat on the back burner while I was working on other things until one evening, my husband, who figures prominently in a lot of my stories, went out one stormy summer night to take the garbage out and never came back. He came back eventually, and he's back here now. But he was gone so long that I started to wonder if something might be amiss, and perhaps I ought to check on him. And found him standing in a pool of lamplight in the open garage door, having a conversation with a tiny wet neighbor. And she was saying, excuse me, sir, it's late and it's raining and I have nowhere to go, and can you help me? And she was meowing at the top of her voice. And you can see her. I have a pointer on here, and I'm not sure where it is, but way up at the top of the roof line, there's a little black cat. That little black cat, we came to know her very well, and when she meowed, she sounded like she was saying no. Do you like your food? No. Do you want to come inside? No. Do you like my dog? No. And a chance remark from a friend said, are you still writing mysteries? Are you still writing for kids? And she said, mystery writers love cats. What a mystery. It's kind of sitting there, just waiting for the right thing to click for me. And when I had the idea for premeditated murder, at first I thought it was going to be a contemporary novel. And I have never successfully written a novel set in the 21st century. Because when I sit down to do it, I forget things like how people eat and how to get in and out of a car, and I absolutely fail at 21st century world building. But somehow, when the idea was, when I had the title and the cat and the Victorian mystery, of course, obviously, and so once I knew that, I was off and running. And so Premeditated Myrtle is the story of a 12-year-old girl who is obsessed with the new sciences of criminology, with fingerprint evidence and forensics and crime scene analysis. And the 1890s are a fascinating era in forensic history. All of the techniques that are so familiar to us today with crime solving and the things that you see on CSI were just being developed, and there's a lot of skepticism from the public and from police about whether or not those methods were going to aid in the solving of crimes. And when Myrtle's neighbor dies under mysterious circumstances, she takes it upon herself to prove that it was murder and solve the crime, even if no one else believes her, including her father, the local prosecutor. And so, along with her trusty stalwart governess, Miss Judson, and the neighbor's cat, Peony, she goes in search of solving this great crime that has happened in her neighborhood. And so that book led to that costume. And you are all welcome to come up and have a closer look at my costume. Which led to book 2, How to Get Away with Myrtle, which is my personal favorite of the series, in which a dull railway holiday to the seaside is livened up by jewel thieves and murder. But in this case, this was a really interesting one because by this point we had worked with the cover artist on the book already, and they asked me for more input, and they said, is there anything in particular you would like to see Myrtle in on this cover? And I said, yes, I would love to see her wearing this Sailor Now, this is a woman's outfit from about 1890, but it's a midi, which is short for midshipman's uniform, which is after a naval officer, and Myrtle makes a comment in book 2 about how ridiculous such an outfit would be for her to wear, which meant naturally I had to put her in it on the cover. And right before this book came out, I had this brilliant idea what I was going to make. I needed desperately to make the midi that went on the book cover. And so this is one of the things that I love as a historical costumer, as a maker, as an artist, as a reader, is seeing, so somebody in the past designed this gown, somebody made it, somebody wore this to the beach in the 19th century. All 130 years later, I sent this picture to an artist, he painted that. I loved that so much that I sewed it up. So it's sort of this continuum of making and of artistry and keeping the past alive that really I find so fascinating. Book 3 came out last October. It is Cold-Blooded Myrtle, in which Myrtle and Miss Judson, her governess, finally made an appearance on the cover, and I was so excited to see that. And this is Myrtle and Miss Judson solved their first cold case, and we replicated so it takes place at Christmas time during an exceptionally Victorian Christmas, and the local shop window has this Christmas display of their Christmas miniatures. And in the display, somebody has broken into the shop and vandalized it and depicted a crime from decades ago that happened in the village. And this idea, like many of the Myrtle ideas, came from something that happened in real life. And it was not a crime, exactly. As you can see, kind of here, we've got a sort of miniature Dickens village. Some friends of ours had set up their Christmas village, and their daughter was home from college, and the whole thing was there with the houses and the snow and the trees and this lovely setting. But something nefarious befell that setting. I suspect there was probably a feline agency, there was probably a cat involved in whatever happened next. But they came back and found the village in ruins. There was carnage. It was bodies strewn everywhere, buildings broken, trees torn down, carriages overturned. And their daughter, a young woman after my own heart, rather than putting everything back to rights and setting it up, again, turned it into a crime scene with yellow tape and blood stains in the thick paper. And they posted pictures on Facebook. And my husband, again, came running and he said, I have your next Myrtle book. And I loved that idea so much. And I was like, yes, we need a crime that's been depicted in the Dickens village. And so that is what happens so the opening scene of Cold-Blooded Myrtle and Miss Judson have come to the shop. They're awaiting the unveiling of the shop window, and when it comes open, one of the neighbors looks in and she's like, olives and a well? What is that? Everyone's standing about looking at somebody's rubbish, and someone recognizes Olive Blackwell, and she was a young woman who had disappeared. She fell to her death. Or did she? From the campanile of the bell tower at the local college when she was a student there during a mysterious ritual. And it turns out that Myrtle's mom was actually, her mother was actually at the incident where Olive Blackwell disappeared. And so that is the cold case that Myrtle must solve in book 3. Now we're coming up this fall, getting ready to release. Oh, also I didn't need. That is my little opinionated cat who, when she meows, she sounds like she's listening. So these are some more costumes that I've made, but we're going to skip through those for now. You can come back to me up to the release of book 4 coming out this October, just a couple of months away, in Myrtle Peril, and we are reviewing the dress that I made for the cover of book 4. And this is one of my favorite things that the artist Brett Halpus has done, because Myrtle is obsessed with forensic science. She's saving her money to build her own chemistry lab, for better chemistry equipment. She has her mom's microscope that she does a lot of her investigations with. And so after 3 book covers that he sent me, Myrtle in our laboratory, my heart just was so full. And then of course we have Peony and Myrtle's dad in the top pane. However, this is one of those cautionary tales, and I'd like to say this when you write a series. Whatever you do in the first book, you're kind of stuck with for all the other books. So Premeditated Myrtle has these oh so clever chapter titles, and they're all kind of in legal Latin, and then there are these epigraphs from this book, A Guide to Criminology, that being written by the erudite H.M. Hardcastle. And so of course now I'm writing book 5, and so every book I have to kind of give more and more clever chapter titles and more epigraphs of Myrtle's new book. And in the same vein, because I have gotten myself committed to this hobby of doll costuming and making the cover gowns for the Myrtle books, I roped myself into recreating this dress, which is again, it was a catalog image that I found from 1890, and I sent to the artist. And he decided not just to take inspiration from the general imagery, but to reproduce it exactly, down to every last painful detail, including we've got pleats, we've got sleeve cuffs, we've got little white trim at the sleeves, we've got piping on this yoke, we've got this white collar, we've got this other white collar, we've got this purple collar, we've got this purple collar with piping. And I stared at that dress for months. I was like, how in the heck am I going to make that? And I like to say that my job is not actually making things, but it's figuring out how to make things, which is a lot less fun than making things. But I spend a lot of time, most of my time, figuring out how I'm going to write a book, figuring out what the story is going to be, who the characters are, who've done it, how they've done it, and how Myrtle figures it out. But finally, when I sat down, I pulled all the pieces together, and yes, it does look amazing, but I will say there was a moment of doubt, and it happens on every single project, every book, every dress, every sewing project, every making project, probably also the raising children. When you get to a point when you're about, I'm going to say 2/3 the way through it, and you think, this is never going to come together. This will never turn out to be a book. This is the worst thing my editor has ever seen. She's going to laugh me out again, and then this dress is impossible. You can't make fabric behave like that, and you can't make fabric behave like that, and I made the fabric behave like that. So that is where we are right now in Myrtle's journey. I am in the middle of revisions on book 5, so this is an exciting time where it seems like there's full possibility, because I haven't read my editor's comments on it, but she's goes through and she's eviscerated it, and she's told me absolutely everything that's wrong with it. I've only read the part where she said, oh, this is brilliant, and I love it. So we're there right now, and then I'm going to dig back into that on Monday, and there will probably be tears, but at least there won't have to be a dress for quite a while. So I'm trying to think. So how many of you are Myrtle fans to begin with? How many of you have heard of the Myrtle Hardcastle mysteries before I got through? Wonderful. How many people were here for the free doll? Good. Nice. Okay, so we can start back with Premeditated. Since we don't have a lot of Myrtle fans here, I can read a passage. You were all, I guess I have to look hard. And, an experienced author who's done talks and probably prefer to have the place marked. Chapter 11? I've only read this 40 times. We're almost there. This is the best thing, isn't it? All the right work. Almost there. Okay, good. Chapter 18, apparently. Motive, means, and opportunities. So, the backstory of this, that Myrtle's neighbor, Miss Woodhouse, has died under mysterious circumstances. Myrtle is attempting to solve this crime using all of her forensic tools. Her main suspect at the moment is the dead woman's niece, Priscilla, who has designs on Myrtle's father, and Myrtle is not really thrilled about this. And Priscilla has come to her house for the evening for dinner. This chapter 18, motive, means, and opportunity. That's one of the clever chapter titles I was wondering about. A suspect must have the motive, the means, and the opportunity to commit the offense. Did he have a reason to kill? Did he have access to the murder weapon and the skill to use it? And was he in the right place at the right time? H.M. Hardcastle, Principles of Detection. The morbid curiosity about what was happening in that dining room among Father, Aunt Helena, and Priscilla felt like ants crawling under my petticoats. I'd stationed myself at the top of the stairs, straining to hear but could make out nothing useful. Peony perched beside me, serenading the dinner party with an undulating song of woe and betrayal. I thought she was spectacular. Until Cook stepped into the foyer, dressed tonight as a butler. The master requests that the cat be removed, she intoned. No, said Peony. I gave a sigh and untwined my legs from the balusters. Yes, ma'am. I scooped up Peony, who responded with one parting utterance shrill enough to break wine glasses, and carried her into the dark schoolroom. The curtains were still open, and I noticed lights on across the way at Red Grace. Some lights were normal, even with Priscilla over here. No one wanted to come home to an absolutely dark house. But these lights were upstairs, in empty bedrooms, not down in the main areas of the house. And the lights shouldn't move. As I watched, one set of windows went dark. A moment later, the adjacent room brightened as someone turned up the gas. I chewed on my thumbnail, trying to decide what to do. I had three options, two of which were sensible. One, notify Miss Judson, that's her governess. Two, alert the diners downstairs, one of whom would certainly be concerned by the nefarious goings-on at Red Grace, but to whom I owe no duty of care. Three, investigate on my own. Dear reader, I will allow you to deduce what choice I made. Before I could talk myself out of it, I tightened my bootlaces, checked that my skirt hems weren't likely to be stepped upon, and loaded up my bag. Onto my head went my deerstalker cap. Last, I opened up the cabinet and retrieved the key with the fleur-de-lis handle, which you can see in the corner. Right here. Retrieved the key with the fleur-de-lis handle. Peony, watching my preparations, almost gave me away. She twined around my ankles, complaining, and ignored all my admonitions to shush. Do you want to come? Yes, she replied, and trotted out of the schoolroom down the back stairs to the scullery door. Thus we prepared to commit the most egregious transgression of which a young lady of quality is capable. I was about to go outside alone after dark. Dear reader, surely I need not enumerate the dangers posed by my present course of action. They are drilled into every girl from the cradle by every possible means. I knew all about Spring-Heeled Jack, the fiend who stalked the pages of the Penny Dreadfuls. Not to mention Jack the Ripper, the fiend who stalked the real-life streets of London only a few years ago. There were body snatchers and burglars. Footnote. Named for Mr. Burke and Mr. Hare, the notorious Scottish raid-robbers turned murderers. Press gangs waiting to drug the unsuspecting and ship them off to sea, and all manner of deviants ready to defile the innocent. I was not certain what this last meant precisely, except that it was practically guaranteed to occur the instant the young lady of quality touched her boot heel to the moon. Of course, she goes on to one enthusiastic request for more reading. Okay, so, book 4, In Myrtle Peril, in which, well, I'm going to start from chapter 1. Chapter 1, Ear, Nose, and Throat. And we can't see down here, I can't, there is a pointer on this, but I can't remember how she told me to use it. Way up in the corner, you can see there is a ship. And the ship is a key component of this tale. Epigraph. Just as a crime can be pieced together by its component parts into a comprehensive whole, so is the human body a mystery that will eventually be solved by thorough investigation. H.M. Hardcastle, Foundations of Legal Medicine, an Introduction to Medical Investigation in Criminal Justice, 18. You are behaving childishly. My governess, the redoubtable Miss Judson, faced the bed, ominous brown bottle in one hand, spoon held aloft in the other like a weapon. Her patient glowered back, weak hand pushing the bottle away. No more medicine. The words, if they could be called as much, scraped out painfully. Miss Judson was without sympathy. If you do not take this, you will not get better. And if you do not get better, Dr. Belden will be forced to return. And if Dr. Belden returns, he will take you to hospital. She paused, a look of deliberation on her light brown face. Perhaps that would be best. She moved to replace the stopper on the bottle. But it was clear that she had won. The sallow hand withdrew, the feverish head nodded, and a spoonful of bitter tincture was administered, for all it really would do. I beheld this issue from a more or less safe position in the doorway. Father couldn't see me behind the tent of sheets and the steaming brazier set up in a stifling room. I twisted my fingers together and considered Miss Judson's words. Father was suffering his 3rd bout of tonsillitis this winter, and that dire of threats had been uttered more than once. Surgery. No, said a fretful little voice beside me. I scooped Peony to my shoulder, grateful for her soft, warm fur and sharp claws digging into my neck. We had stood sentinel here more and more often lately, the room filled with steam and sickness. Dr. Belden was trying every treatment in his arsenal, with only limited success. Her duty done, Miss Judson strode from the room, wheeling me and people into the hallway. People do not die from tonsillitis, she said firmly. They do die from scarlet fever, I pointed out, and erysipelas, and puerperal fever. She could not quite get her lip from working. If your father contracts childbed fever, you too shall make a fortune from the case study, from the publication of the case study. It's not funny. I meant hyena. I had read all the horror stories. I knew how readily a minor illness could turn to catastrophe. Hush, she scolded, then rest. She divested herself of apron and sleeve covers, bundling them into the laundry hamper. She tried not to show it, but I knew she was concerned as well. I had my tonsils out, she said, false brightness in her voice, and I survived. Gradually, I turned my toe against the carpet. Did my mom do it? Miss Judson's mother was a nurse in French Guiana, endowed, in my estimation, with medical knowledge bordering on the superhuman. Hardly. A surgeon did it at the Roswell Infirmary, that's what Courtney's told. And all the upperclassmen from the neighborhood boys' school crowded in to observe. Wide-eyed, I breathed. Was that before Ether? In return for that, Miss Judson sent me an afternoon on study on the history of surgery, which was not, all things considered, particularly reassuring. Father indeed does not improve and does end up in hospital for tonsillectomy, where he is absolutely convinced he sees a murder. And Miss Judson and Merle do not believe him. And so it was very fun to, after 3 books, to turn the tables and have them be the skeptics and have Father, who is usually trying to forestall them from their investigations, him being the one who's insisting that there's that. So, books and dolls. Let's take a second. Does anybody have any questions? You want to ask me? You want to ask Myrtle? Anything you want to tell me? Okay, just go on.
Couple questions back here.
Yes, oh, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry.
I have a question for you.
Yes.
So, there was somebody that saw a porcelain doll. Well, I saw porcelain dolls. Like, what's the difference between porcelain dolls and plastic dolls? Which I know porcelain, but does it make a difference?
Unfortunately, I'm not your doll expert, but you will hear from Madeline. Will you touch on that a little bit? Plastic dolls, a little bit. We felt that composition would have been our first plastic dolls in about the late 19th century. I would think the porcelain would have always probably been higher end. Although if you've been to the Toy and Miniature Museum, I wish I had the picture. I just need Becca. I need to carry around my picture of a box of heads with me everywhere I go. There's a delightful exhibit of a box of porcelain doll heads that would have been on sale at your local shop in the late Victorian era, and you could take them home and you could make your own soft doll bodies. So for me, the dolls that I am primarily working with, they're all vinyl with soft bodies, so the American Girl era of 18-inch dolls. And there you have the extent of my doll knowledge.
Okay.
I'm sorry. Yeah, I'm here as the book person. So, books and dolls, and why are they such natural companions, and why are we here today talking about books and dolls at the same event? Isn't that cute? Somebody's out there making miniature Victorian outfits for American Girl, Mrs. Starling. They are both, so I gave this a little bit of thought, and this is my personal thoughts about the ideas of how they are related and how they come together nicely and work together so well. Books and dolls are both the favorite companions of introverts everywhere. People who don't mind their own company and who are easily entertained by the tales inside their own head. I might know someone like that. Both encourage creativity and imagination. This is make-believe play. This is stepping into imaginary worlds. This is stepping into imaginary worlds, into adventures that we can get to in real life. Books and dolls. This is an astronaut Buffy from the 90s. She's fantastic. And this is the book cover of one of my favorite books from when I was a child. And I didn't spend a lot of time with my fabulous white horse fighting dragons, but I spent a lot of time with that book and dreaming about fighting dragons with my imaginary horse. And playing with dolls, experiencing life through dolls, and reading allow us to dream of grand adventures. They allow us to play out scenarios that might be less realistic in real life, except that when you dream of grand adventures, when you pretend to be an astronaut as a kid, you have that thought in your mind that it's possible and you can grow up. Because those dreams that we have when we're kids and we're playing make-believe and we're doing imaginary, we're solving imaginary crimes in our neighborhood, you can grow up to do those things for real. I've wanted to be an author since I was about 10 years old, and I did not have an author doll. I looked long and hard for pictures on the internet of author dolls, and there's not apparently such a thing as maybe not that exciting as being an astronaut, but I couldn't fight dragons anymore, so I would write those stories instead. So, I have a reading list of some of my favorite books about dolls to share with you. This book is one of my absolute favorites because it reminds me so much of how I played with dolls when I was a kid. This is Penny and Penelope by a friend of mine. He and I share an agent, Dan Richards, and I was lucky enough to see this book before it went to publication. And it is the story of Penny and Penelope, a play date where these two girls get together and they play with their dolls, and they have very different ideas of what they would like to play. And Penny wants to play with play princess dolls, and Penelope is this action heroine, and together they survive and defeat the siege on the castle, and it is absolutely magnificent because it reminded me of being 9 years old and taking my little ponies and my friend down the street getting G.I. Joes. And the G.I. Joes, which were posable, were the perfect size to ride the My Little Ponies into battle. So that's, this story really hit home for me about the way that we really play and the way that we really, the stories that how we bring them to life. And this is a very sweet story. Sophie's Squash. This young girl falls in love with, she has a new friend that's a squash, and it's the adventures that she goes on with her doll friend, the squash. And this is a fun book about, so Doll E 1.0 by Shannon McCloskey. The girl gets a doll as a gift. She's a tinkerer, she's a maker. This is a book about dolls and makers. And she knows electronics, and when she gets the doll in the home, she's like, what does it do? How do you turn it on? Where are the batteries? How does it work? And then the doll doesn't do anything because it's just a doll. And so her adventure is to improve upon the doll and to use her own making, her own skills to build a better doll. Now, for some reason, picture books about dolls are nice. The dolls are nice. The dolls are your friends. The dolls are your companions. You play with the dolls. You go on adventures with the dolls. It's wonderful. When we get to books for older kids, for kids who would be reading the middle books, doll books start to get creepy for some reason, and I'm not entirely sure what this is. I can just bear some closer study, but these are some fantastically creepy books starring dolls. This is a favorite book of mystery and murder fans worldwide. I have been on so many panels with other mystery writers for kids who cite the Dollhouse Murders as one of their favorite mysteries from when they were kids. And it's about a kid who, I cannot remember how the main character acquires this dollhouse, moves into a house where the dollhouse already exists, or gets the dollhouse at a yard sale, whatever. But what happens is the dolls start playing out a crime that has occurred in the house. It is so absolutely creepy and fantastic. Holly Black's Doll Bones, which is, I read it a very long time ago, and I don't remember exactly what it is, but it has a wonderfully creepy doll with a curse on it, and a kid who plays with action figures, and that's, a central part of his identity as he's going into junior high, and his stepdad keeps trying to get him to get rid of him. And so right before he and his friends go on to their next school, apparently I remember more than I thought, they go on a grand adventure to reunite this doll with where she is supposed to be. Another very odd story that I remember as a kid, Behind the Attic Wall by Sylvia Cassidy, about a lonely girl who moves into a house, and it's involved in the sort of the life of the dolls that live in the attic, and it's creepy and strange and haunting and beautiful. What's that in the background? Slightly older kids. Coraline is a pretty familiar book. Do you know Coraline? Yeah, Coraline has a doll. Well, Coraline becomes a doll?
Yeah, Coraline becomes a doll.
Coraline becomes a doll, yes.
I remember that she's a girl and her mom becomes a doll.
Yeah, that is creepy, isn't that great? Yeah. So this is totally wrong, but my favorite movie in the book is a picture book called The Wolves in the Walls. And it's about a little girl with her pig puppet. And she keeps hearing noises in the walls, and she tells her parents, she said, there's noises in the walls. And they're like, there aren't any noises in the walls. And she said, there's wolves in the walls. And they're like, there aren't any wolves in the walls. Because if there are wolves in the walls and the wolves come out, it's all over. And I just, right? Yeah. Of course, the wolves come out. So one of my favorite Victorian, it's a more recent book, but it's set in the Victorian era, Splendors and Blooms by Laura Inglitz, who won the Newbery Medal for Good Master Sweet Babies. That wonderful book about, we have library people here, that wonderful book about poetry of the Middle Ages. Poetry about the Middle Ages. This is a fantastically creepy book about where adults are marionettes, and a little rich girl who is very lonely comes to a puppet show on her birthday and gets turned into a puppet. And she spends the rest of the book as a puppet, and the puppeteer and the costumer for the puppeteer have to return her to her natural state. And Kuku-san, which is, I put on there mainly because it's a book that I love, it's about a changeling, and if anyone knows scary stories, the real child has been replaced by this girl who thinks she is the girl named Penny, and it's told from her point of view. And Penny believes she's Penny, but she learns throughout the book that she's actually a changeling, and she's not real, and she's been created to mimic this girl who's been kidnapped, and she's a doll made by fairies, and she's falling apart, and she has to go find the original Penny, and she has to keep herself from coming apart at the seams, and so it's a lovely, beautiful book. So, right at the 40-minute mark, some closing thoughts about dolls. Why dolls are important. We're all obviously doll lovers, and we're supposed to think that dolls are important. And playing with dolls for young people, studies have shown that make-believe play in general, playing with dolls in particular, increases kids' empathy and their theory of mind, which is the understanding that when I look at you, I know you're having a thought, and you know that I'm having a thought. And that's something that we develop as we age, and it's important to our interaction with other humans. So even though your introverted kids are in the rooms playing with their dolls, they're still learning to project the idea that this imaginary person has thoughts and feelings too. Doll play improves language skills when you're speaking to your dolls and you're telling stories with your dolls, and it helps make younger kids reading ready, and so it improves your literacy preparedness as a young child. It also, in a very rudimentary sense, begins to teach kids about anatomy, so it's good for science. You know, you can arm, foot, finger, toes, head. Not all the anatomy, but some of that can come out later. It improves younger children's fine motor skills, like when they dress and undress things, and learn how to operate snaps and tie little tiny shoes. And the biggest point, representation matters. And when you're a children's author and you do a lot of events with libraries and teachers and with kids all over the country, we talk a lot about having all kinds of books for all kinds of kids. And that books for children are either windows or mirrors, and books that are mirrors reflect back your own experience, the experience that you are living. And so for me, as a middle-class white kid, reading the Beverly Cleary books, the Ramona stories would have been mirrors. And then windows that show kids and show readers a different experience than their own. And I was always a good windows reader. I always wanted to read about something that was outside my own experience. I learned that the dolphins are giving me historical fiction, or she's giving me a story set in Africa. That was the kind of adventure that I was interested in going on. And so dolls can do the same. You can have a doll that looks like the child or you can have a doll that looks very different from the child. And it's important for our kids to be exposed to both of those. I was a middle-class kid growing up in a small college town in the 1980s, and I desperately wanted the black Malibu Barbie with the orange bathing suit, but you could not buy a black Barbie doll in Ames, Iowa in the 1980s, which, was just sad for me, but unfortunate for my classmates who had come from all over the world and only had white dolls to choose from. So And this is one of those, this is an iconic moment from a psychological study that went on to be part of the Brown versus Board of Education Supreme Court trial that ended segregation in schools. I have their names. Psychologists, which I really do have their names. I can't. Two Black psychologists did a study with Black children where they, in the 1930s, where they offered the children, they did this all over the country, in the North and the South, in segregated and non-segregated parts of the country, and they offered the children dolls that were identical other than race, and uniformly, the Black children preferred the white dolls, and it was such a watershed moment in the idea that we need things that represent our own experiences and that show us whatever background we come from, that we need to be told as children that we are beautiful, that our experiences matter, that things that look like us, that people that look like us, that dolls that look like us are beautiful and valued. So, briefly, we'll touch on, we have some gentlemen in the audience. You hear a lot about boys and dolls when you're in the doll community, when you're a parent. Should my boy play with dolls? My boy should play with dolls. My boy should have a baby doll. When I Googled this for a little bit of research to back this up, I got this lovely hit. Danger of boys playing with dolls. Little boys who play with baby dolls, danger. More likely to develop the capacity to care for others. Oh God, God forbid. They may also develop their capacity to nurture. But the thing is, our boys do play with dolls. We just call them action figures. And even if your little boy isn't playing with a baby doll, even if he's riding his G.I. Joes into battle, that still does all the wonderful, that has all of the wonderful benefits of doll play that we talk about. With theory of mind and engaging creativity and dreaming up magical adventures. One of the most important reasons that dolls are important, and this is going to sound obvious and facetious, but I have a point. You should value dolls because girls love them. And most of us here, we're girls, are girls, grew up from girls. When you're a girl, you've grown up as a girl when you're a woman, you hear a lot that your interests are less important, they are trivialized, they are taught that they're not valid, they are made fun of in the media. And this has been going on for centuries. Young teenage girls were the first consumers of the first novels in the 18th century, and literary critics called them silly and frivolous. And look where we are now with novels. Little girls love things like Twilight, girls love books, and they are routinely told that the things that they love, that they value, are not important, that they're silly, they're ridiculed for the things that they like. And if we want to raise strong women who speak up against injustice, who learn to embrace their own interests, even if they're morbid or if they're on whatever spectrum you have, we need to encourage our girls to love the things that they love and to tell them that the things that they're interested in, whatever they may be, are worthwhile and they're valuable. And that includes everything from soccer to forensic science to dolls to sewing. I grew up in an era of fantasy novels like The Hero and the Crown and Tamara Pierce and books where if you were going to be the hero in a girl's book, in a fantasy novel, you couldn't wear a dress, couldn't sew, certainly couldn't play with dolls. You had to do everything you could to mask your femininity. And thankfully we're in an era now where it's a little bit better, but we need to keep saying it, and we need to keep telling our girls and our people, we can dream of being Batman, we can dream of being astronauts. It doesn't matter who we are, what our background is, or what we look like. Those dreams can absolutely come true. So that, apparently that was an Will I have a movie of the Myrtle books? I would love. So here's my, if there's happened to be a film rights agent in our audience, or your uncle or your co-worker's brother-in-law, I am ready. I think they would make a fantastic short format Netflix series, like 6 episodes per book. So like Murdoch Mystery, I think they would be amazing. So I just found out that one of my favorite mysteries from when I was a teenager, Christopher Pike's, I've forgotten the title of it, a book by Christopher Pike, but I love when I was a teenager, has been picked up from Netflix. So you never know, we might be waiting another 30 years, but I think they would make fantastic, if possibly expensive, series. Yes, but not my fault. So, yeah, please, thank you. Let's all take a moment to put the idea of a Myrtle series into the atmosphere. I mean, who knew that there would be Myrtle dolls? Right? So anything is possible if we took the thought out and we think positively about it. So, anybody else before I yield the floor to Madeline? Yes, you. When it comes to you. Oh, okay, so how do I make Myrtle look the same in each book? And I, sadly, not the person to answer that question, but my artist, the cover artist for the books is the fantastic Brett Hallquist, who reads the books when they're in manuscript form. He's got the 5 right now, and he has his picture in his head of what he thought Myrtle should look like. And she has kind of evolved and refined as we've gone along. She, apparently, we had a slightly different hairstyle in book 1, but apparently it was too uncontrollable, so she just whacked it all off and was not completely short. So much more practical. But, so yeah, so it's Brett's job to, kind of keep the continuity of his own art. And he is the one who, designed her fantastic face. I love this cover so much because of her determined energy and her, the passage that I read to you about her going outside alone after dark. That is what he depicted on the cover. And just love that. So yeah, so it's all Brett, and I cannot draw a stick figure that is recognizable as a stick. So I would, so my one stick is going to look like my next stick over. So that is, thankfully, there are professional artists out there who probably played with action figures when he was a kid. So, yes?
Do you have some favorite sources of information about the Victorian era that you incorporate in your stories?
Yes, I do. So from a making standpoint, first, so from a making standpoint, I spend way too much time on Pinterest. And Pinterest has, heuristic learning. Once you search for stuff, it knows what to show you. And so that's how I found a lot of the Victorian costumes that I have been incorporated into the books and that's where I do a lot of my research. For the plots of the books, I have this secret weapon. The publishing house Bloomsbury, which was originally based in England, has this wonderful series of books called the Shire Library, and they are small, short format, focused texts on one very narrow subject matter. And I think I have every Victorian one that comes out, and there's like the Victorian garden, and there's the Victorian gardener, And there's the Victorian schoolroom, the Victorian policeman, the Victorian criminal, the Victorian photographer at work. That'll move a little bit longer. And so when I know that I'm going to be incorporating a particular kind of subject matter in each book, so there's a photographer, a young photographer named Clive in book 2, and so I did a lot of research into period cameras and found that the Victorian photographer work which was published in the 70s, was a really good source on how the cameras actually work and how you work to set up a tripod. So strangely, I discovered I'm not much of an online video person, but one of the reasons that I chose the 1890s to set the books in, particularly 1893, the summer of 1893 when Premeditated takes place, is because it was the year of the Columbian Exposition, the Chicago World's Fair. And I knew from I just knew that the Chicago World's Fair had tons and tons and tons of information available. Not just research that had been done because of the H.H. Holmes, the serial killer who operated sort of in and around the Chicago World's Fair, but the fair itself was so famous. There was so much media coverage. There were so many souvenirs. There's so much extant material from this era that I do a lot of primary sources. So if you're a kid and you're taking history, you know the difference between primary and secondary sources. Primary sources are like diaries and advertising, and secondary sources are, somebody has written a book about murders in the Victorian era. And so I go back and forth between them. And now, having written 5 books set in the middle 1890s, I have a really solid foundation in the era. And now I'm mostly reading for particular technology. So there's some mineralogy happening in the book I'm writing now. So I'm like, what do we know about this particular mineral in 1894? And so I'm contacting geologists and that. So yeah. Sure. Am I going to sell them? I wish I had time. But in the back of the room, the dolls that they have made and dressed for Myrtle are going to be, they're taking orders for this now. I have thought, so in Fantasyland, when I'm not on my deadline, I have a book a year. And if I could sew faster, and if I would make something that was slightly ridiculously less detailed than the things that I make, I might be able to, I have given thought to the idea of bringing costumes when I do events. Like I'm usually at Planet Comic-Con here in Kansas City and do other local events like that, and having the dolls on display with some costumes. But will that ever happen? But, not a lot of work. You can pick up a needle and start sewing. Even not a needle, ribbon and a tunic. My first doll clothes were a scrap of fabric with a V cut in the neck, pulled over, and a string tied around the neck. And at one point, when we were in college, my husband and I found, was it Ben Kenobi, Obi-Wan Kenobi action figure at a comic book shop, but he was naked. And it disturbed me having naked Alec Guinness in my living room in college, so I made him a little tunic, and then I felt bad that it was plain, so I embroidered a Greek key around the outside edge of it. So that just happens. So I am thinking I could have talked to you all for a week on this subject matter, but we have other speakers that we want to hear from today, so I've taken up 55 minutes, so I'm going to yield the floor now. I think you guys are fantastic audience.